Hello and welcome to the coronavirus update for the 24th of May 2020, where we now have over 5 million people having actually been confirmed as having the virus in the world, and over a third of a million people have died from the virus. Now, the ratio of those two, of course, basically is if you're confirmed as having the virus, it's your chances of dying. And I've been tracking that number since when there are only a million or so, well, less than a million cases in the world. And back then, the death rate was less than 5%, and it crawled all the way up to about 7%. And now it's starting to go down again, which is good. This means there are more people being tested, and yeah, so more detection means a lower death. Well, the death rate is exactly the same, but it's lower effective death rate. And you'll notice there's a sort of uptick. If you take a look at the world cases of coronavirus, they've been kind of stable for a bit, and now it's starting to jump up again. And I think you can almost entirely thank Brazil for this, which we'll come to later. And Brazil and their President Jair Bolsonaro, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but, the guy who dismisses the coronavirus as a little flu is really going to give Donald Trump a run for his money in being the country to handle the coronavirus the worst. So Donald Trump, he's been a busy boy. One of the things he said this week is if he had it over again, he would do nothing different, which is just so insane on so many levels. You come back to the early spread of the coronavirus in America, where it doubles about every 3 days. So it's about an order of magnitude every 10 days, which means if you'd have acted 10 days earlier, then you would have had about 10% of the death. So rather than actually be looking at 100,000 dead now, you'll be looking at 10,000 dead. Now, the thing is, Trump never really put out a federal response to the coronavirus. He basically said, you're on your own estate to deal with it, however, which again kind of negates the very point of a federal government for things like this. But anyway, the nearest he got was declaring a state of emergency about then, when there was 500 odd cases per day in mid-March, that sort of thing. So if the action had been taken, if there had been coherent action taken at the beginning of March, you wouldn't be looking at 100,000 dead now. You'd be looking at 10,000 dead. You would have saved 9 out of the 10 people who would have died. And looked with that as a background, Trump stands there and says, if I had it over again, I would do exactly the same over again, which is kind of like saying that he wouldn't try to save, he would have the option of saving 9 out of 10 people just by acting 10 days earlier. But he wouldn't do it, which, yeah. And that's just acting 10 days earlier, at the beginning of March. Now, and this is where it kind of gets crazy that, if it have acted 20 days earlier, which is like very late February, you'd be looking at 1,000 dead now rather than 100,000. That's what 20 days would do for you. But again, if he had it over again, he says he would do exactly the same, which is, yeah, this is not what you would call competent leadership. And it's not, there are people who say, why do you bash Trump? Because what he's saying is stupid. I mean, it's really, and his latest, whatever, he wants places of worship to open again. And he says he will having not overridden the governors to impose some sort of stay-at-home order to inhibit the spread of the virus, he's now threatening to override the governors to force places of worship to open, which would increase the spread of the virus. And yeah, I mean, it's difficult to think of something that you could do that would actually be a worse way of handling this. And of course, there's the optic stuff about, playing golf whilst all this is going on. But, you take a look at this, the president of Brazil, who just dismisses it as a little flu. Well, Brazil, if you come back to this, they're entering the exponent phase. Well, they've not yet left the exponent phase. Now, bear in mind that you can be a little forgiving for places being caught off guard by this early on. So you take a look at places like China. Yeah, you scroll the clock back to the early days of China when they were in the exponent phase. Yeah, they if you like, it was more unexpected for them because they were the first people to get it. And the same with South Korea, both of which handle it, got on top of it fairly quickly. If you like, most of the places in Europe, these curves all have the same scale on the bottom. You come to places like Italy, which was the next place to cook up. They didn't start, they cooked up, almost a month later. Right? So they had an extra month to know that it was coming. And with America, they had even longer before it started to cook up in America. Yeah, again, you knew that something like this could have been coming and had the chance to prepare for it. And now you come to places like Brazil, where, actually, maybe they started cooking up about the same time as America. But they are now rivaling America. They're almost the only country to rival America in terms of new cases per day. They're up to 20,000 cases per day. And America is almost down to 20,000 cases per day, not quite. But I mean, you can see the way the wind is blowing that Brazil is, they're heading up pretty strongly. And Russia, they kind of look like they've plateaued a bit. But again, they're well short of the American numbers. Well, if you scale them to the size of the country, Russia's about half the size of America in terms of population. So, per capita, they're probably fairly similar. Brazil is... America is about 300 million. Brazil is about 200 million. And so, per capita, they're about the same already. And it's not just them either. You scroll across the border to Peru, and actually maybe not quite so much. How's Chile doing? Yeah. Right, so this is one of the... this is a bit of a kicker, right? If there is going to be any seasonal spread of the disease, you expect it to go better in the northern or the southern hemisphere. And at the moment, it's spreading pretty well in Brazil, in Europe, everywhere. Nothing seems to slow it down greatly. But this also highlights another problem. In many ways, this is kind of like global warming on steroids. That the actions of one country can affect what happens in countries on the other side of the planet. So for instance, what happens in China can affect the rest of the world. Or, if Brazil decides that it's not going to take it seriously, they're going to breed up so much of this virus that it's going to be a problem for the rest of the world. Now, you could say this is fairly similar to global warming in that, the pollution released in whatever, any developed country has an effect on the rest of the planet. It's not just, you're not looking at just local effects here. So, yeah, I mean, in many ways, when this is all over, this isn't going to be over for a long time. Yeah, this is scratching the surface. Even in America, this is, you're probably looking at 1% of the solution. 1% of the population's had the coronavirus. You can just resume the exponent from here without even so much as batting an eyelid. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see, what effect making sure the church is open again is going to have on all of that. But also, Iran's quite an interesting one, because Iran just doesn't have a second wave, but it kind of looks like it's on a third wave as well. So this was the first wave. It was one of the first countries to cook up, and then they looked like they had it kind of contained, and they had a second wave, which looked kind of contained, and now, yeah, they're going up again. And Saudi, not Saudi, sorry, this is Iran. I wonder how Saudi looks, actually. Right, so this is like one of the, oh God. Yeah. Iran, there's quite a lot of the mountain regions where it's cool and maybe not so hot. Saudi is a desert. So it's spreading quite happily in the desert, although, even in the desert, people are going to get together indoors because it's air conditioned or something. But yeah, Iran. Sorry if I called it Saudi earlier. Yeah, they're almost into wave 3 of this, and that's likely what it's going to be like for almost everywhere else in the world. In fact, I'm almost certain everywhere is going to get a second wave. So no, I didn't want I wanted the UK. There we go. So the UK is finally looking like it's starting to get under control. But places like Germany have started to reopen. And the problem with that, of course, is this rate's going to increase. The thing is, once these numbers get really low, people get very complacent because the virus is practically non-existent. So why should we bother with all the social distancing now? Which, of course, just increases the spread rate of the virus. And once it gets up to the point where it starts growing exponentially again, there's a 2-week lag on this, bear in mind. So whenever you decide that your spread rate's getting too high, if you put the restrictions in place then, it's still going to go up for another 2 weeks after that. Yeah, I reckon basically everyone's going to need a second wave just so they realize that this is something that's going to go on for a long time, which is a super depressing message. But basically, we've got to adapt to the new normal that, not touching things when you don't have to, avoiding social gatherings with too many people. I mean, this thing with the nightclub in South Korea was incredible. They traced, it was one guy, and he spread it to like 100 people in a single night. And how many of those do you need before you get a lot of cases? Anyway, so I'm going to call it quits there because I'll do some happier videos actually about simple science stuff, like all the little projects that I've got cooking. So outside, I was going to start refining my uranium, but I've got to distill some mercury before I get to that. So I planted my uranium, and next to it, I've got a load of carrots, and I'm growing them from seeds. So I want to see how far from the uranium do you have to be before the carrots start succumbing to the radiation field of the uranium. Now, bear in mind, when you get right up close to the uranium, it's getting up for 1,000 times background. So it's going to be interesting to see if there are any effects of that on the carrots. Actually, I said, well, they might sound like mad scientist experiments, but at least they're not depressing, unless you're a carrot, of course. Anyway, yeah, so I'm going to leave it at that for today. Stay safe. If you found the video useful, I'd be grateful if you drop a thumbs up on it. And I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.